Greetings sailors and welcome to a recent replay of mine, this time featuring a destroyer, the Z-46. I don't think I've featured many destroyer replays recently. I've been neglecting the class a little bit, but I've also not maybe been playing them that much since the introduction of the new style carriers, and the ones I have been playing have typically been the ones with better AA. The Chenglu is probably the one I've been most steadily grinding through because it's basically a Fletcher and has pretty good AA, especially if you have the manual AA skill. Or, well, I mean, it always was good with the manual AA skill, although the Fletcher was better with the defensive on top of that. But due to the way that manual AA has changed, it's probably now of greatest benefit to destroyers that have decent AA to start with. But the Z-46 isn't really one of those, so I don't have that as a captain skill on this ship. The last time I showed you a jump destroyer, I think it would have been a Z-23 game. I actually double checked this, and it was about 6 months ago. And that was me just coming off of the stock Z-23, and there's been a bit of a gap. And it's not why I haven't been playing these ships, obviously. I ground through the Z-23 to get to this, and I have now, I think not quite upgraded this. I think I've left the gun range upgrade till last, but I think I've got the hull and the torpedoes upgraded at this point on this, so it's 10.5 kilometers with a torp. So if you notice the range isn't particularly good, it is the stock gun range. Although having said that, some destroyers I purposefully don't take the upgraded gun range because of course you can get unspotted that much quicker with how the spotting mechanics work. So this is a game with both a carrier and radar for me to worry about, and lo and behold, there is the radar ship and there is the enemy Z-46. There aren't that many destroyers in this game though. I'm one of only 2 on our side. Of course the same is true for the other side, and generally I think at the higher tiers anyway, and maybe even at the mid tiers, although not so much I don't think, destroyer numbers have been depressed by the increased presence of carriers just overall. You do still sometimes get games where it'll be 4 or 5 destroyers, but they seem to be a lot more uncommon. And games where you have 1 or 2 destroyers, or sometimes even no destroyers, seem to be much more frequent. So 1 torp into that Salem to begin with, which is nice for me, but of course these are German destroyer torps. They do reload quickly, but they don't particularly have a lot of punch, and you almost might argue that German destroyers overall got a little bit of a nerf with the change to flooding mechanics that happened not so long ago. Flooding isn't as dangerous as it used to be. And although, of course, the damage was never great with these, if you could land successive hits with your relatively fast reload, if you manage to stick a flooding on somebody, then actually that could be a pretty big danger to enemy ships. But not so much these days. People can much more afford to sit and let a flooding happen. So I've been trying to actively contest this cap. As you can see, it's not working out so well. I don't quite have the backup I'd hoped for, and there are a lot of ships here. The enemy team seem to be ignoring the B cap entirely and have thrown more than half their team at the C cap, and our my teammates are in the process of basically backing off as fast as they can, even though we are, I think, roughly equal in numbers. I think they have maybe, what, 1 or 2 more ships? 1 more ship, but my teammates are being a lot more cautious about it, and the battleships especially aren't in a particularly great position to give fire support. So although I was feeling a bit more confident about that going in, despite the presence of the carrier, which very nearly spotted me at the start, and of course the Salem being there as well, it was around about the time when I was losing half of my health that I started to realise that, yeah, no, I don't really have any support here, so I should probably back off. There is good news in that we have capped A though, and I have at least helped slow down the enemy team capping C. But with the enemy Audacious now paying much more attention to this side, this is not nearly so healthy a place for me to be. So yeah, I'm just backing off, hopefully to a distance where the Salem can't radar me again, because I have lost half my health already. I mean, this thing does have a pretty decent chunk of hit points. And I do have the survivability expert captain on this to give extra hit points. It's always a good skill to have on your destroyers. But yeah, having lost half of it doesn't actually benefit me in this case, because I don't have Adrenaline Rush on this capture, or at least I didn't when I played this game. I didn't have enough points for it. I think I do at this stage, as of now recording this video. But I was 1 point shy of being able to get Adrenaline Rush, and I subsequently got the point that I needed. So the enemy team's now starting to take an interest in the middle. Just looking at the mini-map, I mean, we've taken A, and that's good, and although there are a couple of scattered enemy ships to the northwest, most of the enemy team is bunched up around C. And so therefore, that's quite a big clump of firepower. Our team is a lot more scattered. We do have 2 ships going for the B cap. We have these ships to the south here, but it's not nearly as effective a blob of firepower, and we're not particularly trying to put pressure on the middle apart from that Moskva and Yamato. So overall, it doesn't look that good at the moment. We are at least roughly equal on points and ships lost, but if the enemy team starts aggressively pushing for the middle, well, I mean, you can see how far south those cruisers down there are to the south. And we did have an Edinburgh that was maybe trying to chase after the 2 cruisers to the northwest, but I think they fought better of it. So yeah, overall, it's a bit of a mixed bag. It could be worse, but it certainly could be a lot better, and it doesn't look great for us, but it doesn't necessarily look disastrous either. At this stage, I think there's a strong argument for me to have not opened fire there. I think that was, in retrospect, a mistake. I saw the opportunity to fire without anybody else really having a chance to fire back at me, which is okay, that's fine, that's good, but that then gives away my position. And so having pulled in and smoked, because hey look, there's planes overhead, I think just catch the tail end of the Salem must have been radaring and then just pulled into range, because it goes off again, and so it would have been fine for me to sit in the smoke, except then the carrier starts making a drop, and I don't know initially if they're making a drop on me or the Yamato, and as it turns out, yes, it is the Yamato. But at this stage, well, now I'm out of the smoke. I don't have one available again, and I could try and back into it, but that's just going to be all kinds of awkward. And so I've just completely wasted a smoke, but never mind. The Salem, at least I know, doesn't have a radar available immediately, but the planes overhead are still a concern, and so it's actually a good idea right now to get away from my allied ships, because yes, I would get AA cover from them, but I would also get spotted by the planes, and clearly the carrier is at the moment focusing on them rather than me. And if we're both spotted in the same spot, then the enemy team is going to be trying to reset us both, whereas at the moment it's just the Yamato that's getting hit and reset, and I'm essentially getting the most of the cap points. So that bunch of torps there looks like it might strike something. I really would like to kill that Salem, but I will take chunking a big part of the Izumo's health off just fine. That's fine and dandy with me, and that sets them up nicely to somebody else to get the kill. I think I was getting a bit of flooding here, and it might even have killed them, because you can now have multiple instances of flooding stacking on people, of course. But no, the Yamato does get the kill, and although this isn't going to be a particularly high damage game, you know, and it would have been nice to have that kill, I can't say I was terribly mad about it. This was just one of those games where you want the enemy team to die as quick as possible, because although we've managed to draw ahead on points, we're still fairly scattered as a team, and the whole thing is just turning into a bit of a mad scramble. And those 2 enemy cruisers who were going to the northwest are now putting some serious pressure on the A cap. And it really is only that Edinburgh that's there to defend. So I've turned back to try and help out this Edinburgh. But these are a pair of tier 10 cruisers, and I don't have all that much health. So this is a bit of a risky proposition. This is definitely a risky proposition. However, while the ZOW was focused on the Edinburgh, it felt reasonably safe to open fire. But then the Hindi appears, and I don't even think it's the Hindi aiming at me right now. I think it's the Salem. So, yeah, I've actually... yep, it is the Salem's coming from the other side. So I've decided to, okay, looks like the Edinburgh's going to die. I'm going to smoke here. The planes will keep this ZOW spotted. I can try and do a bit of damage. I might not get the kill. But as it turns out, the Edinburgh got their torps out, and so that finishes off the ZOW. And although it's a missed opportunity to do more damage, again, I'm not mad. I just want things to die quickly, because they kind of need to if we are to stay in the lead and have a chance of winning this. So while that's been going on, there's more action in the middle. The Salem is trying to get the cap. The final enemy Yamato is actually now pushing forwards from C, where they've been lurking for a while. And in theory, this looks not bad. We've got Moskva, Grosse first, and Hipper versus those two, but the Hindenburg has shots from here as well, and I'm going to guess, I mean, they know I was here, I'm going to guess they're running hydro, or else they're just being super cautious because they know I'm around. So the torps I've put out so far have been nowhere close, because they've just been behind an island as far as I've been concerned. I didn't even really get the chance to use my smoke to fire at them at all. I mean, I could have used the dying seconds of it, but all the while that this has been going on, our Audacious has been getting closer and closer to the sea cap, maybe not noticing until now that the Hindenburg is also this close. They're now well within spotting range of the Hindenburg, and therefore in serious peril, and we really can't afford to lose our carrier at this stage. That would give their carrier a fair advantage, because although it's not nearly the same in terms of carrier versus carrier gameplay anymore, you can still drop down fighters for people, and also a carrier is still worth a fair choink, a fair choink of victory points. I can English, I can. It's a lie I like to tell myself from time to time. So this Hindi still knows I'm here, and if they had thought I'd run away, well, the torpedoes heading towards them would be some indication that I'm not, but I think they might be more manoeuvring to deal with the threat of incoming aerial torpedoes rather than my torpedoes right now. And this isn't necessarily ideal when you're in a destroyer. If you've got somebody who is airdropping ordnance on enemy ships, and the enemy ships are therefore manoeuvring to avoid that, and it just makes it really hard to therefore get your own torpedoes on target. But in this case, well, if he has hydro, it's run out by this point. And while he has taken a bit of damage from the carrier, it wasn't enough to kill him, but the one torpedo that hits first is, and there we go, I do finally have a kill. In terms of damage, this is actually about it. I don't think I do any more damage for this game. There is still a little matter of a Salem, however. The enemy Yamato went down, but so did our Hipper, Moskva, and Grosse first, which just leaves that ZOW. I can't really tackle this Salem. I don't know how many radars they've got left. They might have as many as 2. It might be less. They might have blown more by this point. I have no way of knowing whatsoever. And of course, there's the enemy carrier still in play as well. And although we do still have a lead in points, it's looking a bit narrow. But our carrier and the ZOW between them are going to very shortly take care of the Salem problem. So that is incredibly useful for me. That just leaves the enemy carrier. And now we come down to a bit of a problem, because there's several different things going on here. The ZOW is low health and at the moment spotted and the focus of the enemy carrier. There's the fact that the enemy team holds 2 cap circles, and although we have the lead, there's still a good 3 minutes left, and that might well be enough time for them to overtake if they are left unmolested. So although I do have the choice here of either sitting and trying to cap, which is potentially, and here we go, definitely going to attract the attention of the carrier. Because initially I thought, okay, these bombers are going for the Zao, and I think they initially were going for the Zao, but then I started capping and the Audacious went, nope, okay, let's do something about that pesky destroyer. So, yeah, I might well get interrupted here. I could smoke. I could try and abandon the attempt to cap and just go and try and kill the Audacious, which is risky in its own right. Because the main thing I'm actually afraid of is the Audacious's rocket planes. They are quite nasty. And so this is why I'm not actually using the smoke right now. But what I decided to do was stick it out in the cap. Because even if we're not getting the benefit of the cap right now and I'm getting a reset, the enemy team isn't getting the benefit of it either. That keeps us ahead on points. And me being here taking the attention of the carrier, although I can't necessarily afford to for that much longer, that is keeping their attention off the Zao. And if the Zao dies, of course, then we lose victory points. So by virtue of running into the island and scraping off it a bit, that actually throws off their final attack. I've lost a couple of thousand hit points, but I'm not particularly critical right now. And then come the attack planes, and as it turns out, those rocket planes, that's far from a full squad. They are not nearly the threat I thought they were going to be. And so in retrospect, if I'd known they didn't have a full squad of those nasty rocket planes available, I might well have tried to just go through that gap and torpedo the Audacious. But I didn't know at the time I made the decision to stick in the cap that that was the case. So yeah, in some ways it might have been the more exciting ending to go through that gap and get the Audacious. But that was, you know, that's based on information that I didn't have at the time of making that decision. And now at this point we've got like 30 seconds to go. There is no time to go through and kill this, for me to kill this Audacious anyway. The Audacious might, however, get to kill the Zao, but because we've been blocking them, because I've been blocking them from getting points from this cap, they are actually nowhere close to us in terms of victory points. So a nice clear gap in between. And although they do kill the Zao, our Audacious is then able to kill them. So not a particularly high damage game, but it was a very close game. And although there were some difficulties in this one, there was also, I think, a nice amount of teamwork going on. I handed out a fair few compliments after the end of this one. And I also received one or two as well, which was quite nice. And it was also a fairly decent outing for the Z-46 score-wise as well, because there was a bit of capping going on, and I did get to do some damage. So although I don't think I did anything particularly decisive in that one, I think I was in the right places at the right times to make the important contributions that eventually helped us secure the victory. I think probably the most important of them was saving the carrier. There is a chance the carrier would have been able to kill the Hindenburg on their own, but in the meantime the enemy carrier would have had a much freer hand to tackle the Zao, and the Salem probably would have lived as well, and at that stage, well, it would have been me and our carrier versus the Salem and the enemy Audacious, and I don't know if I would nearly fancy my chances as much. There's no way I can win in a gunfight with that. I would not have been able to take the enemy cap within enough time of the end to make that difference, and then at that point I suspect it would have been a loss. So yeah, it was really quite a close game, this one, overall, and I enjoyed myself. It was a fun time despite the enemy carrier being in play, but of course I didn't really get harassed by them that much, and that does make a big difference. So hopefully you found this game interesting, and if you did, you can do all the usual things down underneath it, and of course, as always, stay tuned for more.